Greetings and welcome to the Voices Less Said podcast show with Dr. P. Mac. Today, I'm excited to speak in season 4 with Olaolu Adeleye, who is a Nigerian British Canadian leader in public policy in education and equity. He's based in Victoria, BC, where he served as a senior consultant at Deloitte and Touche, or at Deloitte's in government and public sector services, as associate faculty at Royal Roads University, where he has taught communication, culture, and humanitarian studies. His governance roles include serving on the Vancouver Foundation board, as well as on the United World College or Liston B. Pearson College, alongside contributions to organizations like UNICEF and local initiatives such as Victoria's Hospices Cultural Humility Program. Adeleye has a number of publications, and today I'm really excited to speak with him about equity, diversity, and belonging, which is part of the work that he does in community. Join me on Voices Less Said with Dr. P. Mac. Yeah, so Olaolu, I mean, last time the conversations that we were having were so impactful and powerful, and it speaks volumes to the work that you do, and it speaks volumes to just the importance of not only just celebrating Black History Month, but the importance of celebrating humanity and community. I want to step back. Can you use your voice to tell us the kind of engagements, the kind of work that you're doing, and the impact that you're making, not only, where you are working right now, but in broader community?
Wow. First and foremost, I think I have to express gratitude to the people who have created the space for me to work in these spaces, because the work that I do does not exist in a vacuum. And it requires champions, it requires allies, it requires fellow brothers and people who work in collaboration, brothers and sisters. And, I think the work that I've been doing more recently is working with the independent school space.
Okay.
And I think the shift coming from working in higher education with andragogy into pedagogy is one which is very nuanced, but there's still a lot of correlation, of course. And I think some of the bigger conversation pieces that have come to the surface are people truly ready, right? So we have Black History Month, we have all of these different occasions that happen across the calendar year, and even just asking, what does it look like to celebrate that, but not celebrate it and then have it stay there just as something that we're checking off, but something that actually allows us to integrate the learning for students, for children, because what we're looking to do is to actually cultivate global leaders. People who understand this isn't something that happens over there in this forum and distant, but it's happening in my own local context as well. So I think the new focus for me is making sure that those concepts don't just exist as something which is abstract, and also don't just exist in something which is focused in a different region of the world, but bring it back.
I want to pause you there, because you're speaking to me and I understand, right, what you're talking about in terms of the abstract and the here and the there. These are, a listener is probably taking a jog on the Galloping Goose Trail out where, and they're like, oh, okay, I'm trying to make a connection with what they're saying. So I'm going to ask you to walk a couple of steps back. On January 7, 2026, the federal government in Canada launched or announced, this year's theme of Black History Month, and they said that, it's going to be called 30 Years of Black History Month, honoring Black brilliance across generations, from nation builders to tomorrow's visionaries. What does that mean to you?
I think the key piece here is, as we talk about generations, last week we talked a lot about equity. You can't have conversations about equity without looking at the historical context. So the beautiful part about celebrating what has come before, as well as looking at what is to come ahead, is it doesn't allow it to exist just in this moment, but allows people to actually talk about the processes that were in place, or the limitations that existed that caused people to have to rise. Anytime we have anything in history with any population, any group, that they have some sort of a challenge and resistance, inevitably it causes them to rise. And so the beauty of this is this helps to talk about what has transpired that was a catalyst for some of these things, whether it's an invention, whether it's a change in policy, whether it's something that was more tangible for some people as far as a march. Like, why were people marching? So you and I are both people who have come to Canada, you know. So that idea of blackness doesn't even exist in our context because, well, everybody is. The doctors, the prime ministers or heads of state, all of these individuals. Coming into this context and having this conversation then allows the conversation to expand to be one where we have a conversation about brilliance as much as it is about the trauma and the pain as well. Because it allows for the intersection of the different experiences of Canadian Black people in their journeys, in their exploration of how they've arrived here, as well as those who were forcibly removed and brought here through the transatlantic slave trade. But the generational piece is so key and essential because in the same way we talk about being a diaspora from different places and that being a polyvalent experience, the experiences of Black people across this country also looks very different depending on that connectivity to different parts of the world as well.
Okay. And so what does Black brilliance look like to you?
You know, I think sometimes we make it a lot more complex than it needs to be. You know, I think, you know, a few years ago, people were championing Black excellence. And they were showing pictures of people who were wearing suits or they were wearing gowns. And that essentially would speak to somebody who has made it, so to speak. But to me, that image is only telling half of the story. Black brilliance is lived out every single day. Black brilliance is you going to your son's football game. It's going to your job and showing up in as your authentic self, in spite of all of the different things that are happening. It is as much the process as it is the output. I think sometimes we look at it in terms of a noun. It is something that is existing there. I think about it as a verb. It's your actions day to day. It's what you espouse. It's what you believe. It's what you bring in to context, which otherwise would see you as an other that allows you to thrive. And really, at the heart of that is creating space for people to understand that there's different ways in which people live and exist in this world. And those things ought to be celebrated. So Black brilliance for me is the day-to-day actions that allow for that expression of self, that allows us to pull on those different elements of our culture in a different context, and for that to come to the surface.
I love that. And I also think about, this notion of Sankofa, right? This notion of looking to the past. So Sankofa is a term, originating out of West Africa from the Akan community, particularly in Ghana as well as in Côte d'Ivoire, which speaks of this notion of this mythical bird that's got its feet planted forward, but its neck is looking backwards, carrying food in its beak, right? And the symbolism there is that for us to be able to move forward, we're going to be able to look back and see what we can carry, which is the food in the beak, as we progress forward. And so taking a quick, Sankofa reflection, this Black History Month, I think of Canadian luminaries like Lincoln Alexander. I think of Madame Jean Augustine. I think of sports people, sportsperson like Harry Jerome. And I think of, again, talking about sport, I think about Willie O'Ree, who became the first Black player in the National Hockey League, right? Again, just as these pioneers, as these giants that I feel many a time as I do the work that I do, as perhaps you do the work that you do, folks whose, shoulders we're standing on. And when you talk about Black history manifesting in the day-to-day experiences and expressions of Black people in particular, is turning up for sporting events, right? Is turning up at different community events. And so it reminded me of a recent soccer event where I went there, watching my son play a very competitive game. And you sit there and you hear all of these noise. And in the midst of all of these noise, you kind of pick up some racial slurs that are being thrown around. And I'm like, oh, wow. 2026.
Yeah.
Right. And what is being communicated to the kids, what is being communicated between the kids. And so Black brilliance, if again I was to be asked that question, is almost like what you have said, just really just turning up and holding the space and saying, despite the noise, despite the negativity, despite the slurs,
Yeah.
I'm here and my family is here, and we're going to showcase who we are, because our strength is based on the fact that we are united, right? Not just as Black people, but as a community. That, the past couple of days, one of the themes that's been going on in my mind is this notion that human beings are not designed to do life alone.
That's it.
And we discussed, regardless of race,
No.
creed, or we are not designed to do life alone.
At all.
And so this notion of trying to other people because they look differently, or they come from a different place than we do, for me is a whole lot of it's a box of noise, right? It's an empty vessel. It's just a box of noise that has got no effect at all. And so as you think about Black history, and in fact as you think about this theme for this year, honoring Black brilliance across generations, from nation builders to tomorrow's visionaries, from nation builders to tomorrow's visionaries, that's the theme we have here in Canada. How does that speak, if at all, how does that speak to you, and how does it speak perhaps even in the independent school system? How are you putting that out there? How are you contextualizing that theme into your day-to-day work?
Nation builders, it's interesting, even as we talk about nations, because the whole idea and concept of a nation isn't very old, right? And so even when we talk about nations around the world, it's all about self-determination, right?
Yeah.
People feel all of a sudden that who they are needs to be expressed, and then that should be creating the nation in which they exist in. And so when you talk about nation builders, the people that come to my mind, if I can say three right off the top of my head, because I think sometimes in Black History Month, the emphasis goes on the artisans or the poets or the athletes. But, Michelle Jean, which, she for me, because I always believed or had a vision to work in the political sphere, the public sector.
Yeah.
So when I saw her take her position many years ago, for me, that was okay.
Yeah.
Greg Fergus, who was the recent
the speaker.
Exactly. And then, we think about nation building. These individuals occupy seats and spaces where it is actually crucial because they're impacting and affecting policy, but also representing the nation. One last one who's more local is George Anderson. He's Anderson, the MLA.
I think it's the MLA in Nanaimo.
You got it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So even as I said those three names, all of a sudden, they're contemporary. So we're not talking about people who lived previously, but they're talking about people who exist in our current context. And they are contributing to nation building by representing the nation of Canada, Michelle Jean, or helping to, chair these conversations.
And build consensus, bringing people together, right? I might be the Speaker of Parliament. It's not just about me or one side. It's how do I build the bridge?
You got it.
How do I build the nation? I love that.
What better embodiment of nation building than the people who are creating consensus or representing their respective constituencies? So for me, as you ask me, what does that mean within an independent school context? Well, it's about showing learners that, we took time to talk about Black History Month. And we should be talking about many of these things throughout the year anyway. But since we do have a spotlight, let me show you that this conversation isn't just about the artisans, the athletes, and so on and so forth. But it's actually about the many different ways in which these experiences are translated through people who are contributing to the betterment of this country and the state of which we live in. And just by increasing or enhancing the awareness and even just giving them a taste of these different ideas and concepts and these experiences of different people. The idea is that it opens their eyes to see that these things are not, again, in some place which is not connected to where I am, but they're actually right here in my local context.
I love that. And so what's the reception like from students, from community, as you share about these and the word that's coming to my lips, perhaps they probably would not consider themselves as that, but when you speak about these luminaries, right, like What is the reaction from students? Is there, oh wow, or is there like, oh my gosh, that's such a glass ceiling? Can we ever get there as Black people in particular? And I know there's, Black people, the people of color, etc., but Black History Month is specifically focusing
Yes.
on Black. So I ask with that narrowed sort of frame of reference: is there reception from Black students? Do they see themselves as brilliant? Do they see themselves as folks that can attain these different positions?
It's very interesting because, again, we've come to this context in which we are not the majority. And so oftentimes, even as you're having a rollout of any of these months celebrating these pieces, you're being cognizant of the fact that, yes, only a small portion of the population may be Black, but it's important for them to feel like they belong and are celebrated. But you're also actually speaking to a larger audience who aren't Black and making sure that they also are aware of this, because otherwise it feels like it's just those children over there or those adults over there, and it doesn't actually apply to me. So the reception is interesting because, as you know, being an early childhood educator, the conversation you have with a 3-4-year-old looks a lot different from the one with a 13-year-old and so on and so forth. So at that early level, it's really just getting them to understand the concepts as they relate to things like, who would I want in my community, or what would I want to feel like I belong? Because the conversation then allows them to see that it doesn't matter what your skin color is. There is a key principle, or a few of them, which are relevant to every human being, as everyone ought to have that experience of belonging. By the time you get up to 10, 12, 13-year-old, the conversation can expand a bit more to talk about community. So it's not just this abstract concept. It's me first, but then expanding it out to talk about others. And then by the time we get to 17, 18, the conversation really talks about what does that actually mean in terms of enacting or taking steps towards impacting and influencing the policy. I think the balance, though, for me is, I never want these conversations in Black History Month to just be so technical or so policy driven that we also forget the celebration of the culture and the essence of that. So one of the initiatives that I've been really pushing for more recently is, as we think about the diaspora, because it's vast and it's very diverse, how are we highlighting different pockets of the world? Right? So whether Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, West Africa, which in themselves have so many countries in them that are so diverse. But you know what? Just for a moment, let's highlight those parts of the world through the things that are soft power, music, cuisine. Let's just give them a taste to let them know about these realities. So that in the same way as we start to continue this conversation about the experience of Black people in Canada, we're also able to expand into the conversation about the experiences of Black people around the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you know what? As you were speaking, I went back to something you said earlier on about just this notion that when we talk about Black History Month, something that's key to jump up is arts and culture, and then the negating of looking at no. When we look at nation building, Black leaders, Black politicians are right there. At the forefront and doing it. So it's just not about one particular sector. It's just not about arts. It's just not about culture, but it's about nation building. It's about, moving the country forward. And in the same vein too, I just thought of technology too, right? And I thought of the now late, as of a couple of weeks ago, Gladys Brown West, who was, African American, Black, American mathematician who was known for her contributions to the mathematical modeling of the shape of the Earth. And then her work of developing the sort of satellite geodesy like models, which were later became the pillar or the foundational pillar of what we now call the GPS, the Global Positioning System, right? And so without Gladys Brown West, we wouldn't have GPS. We wouldn't be able perhaps to drive on the motorways, highways, and crisscross the country.
And that's the point about why it's important with this theme for this year, as we talk about what was and now what is, right? Because it pays homage to those who actually were those who created the basis in this case for what we are now using, right? And that's not just in technology. That's in our thoughts. That's in our belief systems. That's the policy. It's everything. And you and I, we come from cultures where honoring our elders, honoring those who have come before us is essential. It's everything. It's everything. So it really resonates as I talk about it from a diaspora lens as well. as we talk about it in the context of Canada.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And one of the things that you also did shed light on is that, yeah, it's a month that's set aside, but it's also has to be in so many ways an everyday recognition, right? And the minute we make, and this is my thought, right, that the minute we bring importance and make it an everyday celebration, it there are certain barriers that are broken down, right? Because it's now not the other. Because I can sit back and theorize and say, well, you know what? Oh yeah, we'll just give them a month and they'll celebrate, and then everything will quiet down, and then we move forward.
Yeah.
And back to normal, right? And so I really appreciated hearing from you that thought of, you know what, this should be, you know, sort of every day, and just not every day, perhaps for and this is my own thought, not just every day for the Black, you know, community, but every day for every single person. Right?
Absolutely.
The minute we start celebrating each other, regardless of class, regardless of creed, regardless of race, the minute the world becomes a better place. And I think about this in the context of Canada as a country that is so amazingly rich in terms of just the people skills, the cultures that are here. Like, if we take time to celebrate each culture, if we take, like, we would be such a good model for how community can live and how communities can prosper alongside each other.
Absolutely. You know, you talk about the diversity that exists in this country, and even as we go back in time with Pierre Trudeau, you know, and talking about the approach to this country having a celebration of multiculturalism. What many people don't realize, though, is multiculturalism, it celebrates people in pockets, and they remain in their spaces. What we're actually looking for is interculturalism, and that's what you're speaking to.
Yes. That's
intercultural understanding allows us to celebrate the differences without placing us in our silos and putting one above the other, right? And that is the goal. That is the goal. So it's day to day, and it's not just a month at a time.
Yep. And that is the goal. And as we, you know, sort of work with community, as we work with, you know, children, whether it's through an early child development program or is, you know, an independent school and, you know, elementary or middle school or high school or in university, I think that intercultural perspective is very, very important, right?
It's everything.
It's everything, right? It helps to center humanity, and it helps to center people around this just common idea, common notion that we are all human beings. We all need to be able
to... let's start there. You know what I mean? Let's start there. I'm not saying the other pieces are not important, but let's start there. Because that allows us to ground every other conversation in a place of honor and respect for your fellow person.
That's it. And I think about it from the context of, you know, when you were, you know, talking about just briefly about making it an everyday sort of celebration and recognition is what the UN did, right? Remember, we're just coming out of a decade for the, you know, what do you call it, International Decade for People of African Descent. And then just recently, was it 2 years ago or 2024, the UN decided to extend that decade for us to go into a second decade of celebrating people of African descent. There is a story there. There is a story there because the recognition that we want to do a second decade, it means that there is something. So I thought about it and I was like, maybe I don't know what I don't know, and I'm always open to learning more. But here's what I want to put forth to you and hear what your thoughts are. When we think about, when I think about the foundations of humanity, and then when I read about it, and then when I look at various literature and research that has been done, it's pointing me back to Ethiopia. It's pointing me back to Africa. And I read and I read and I read and I read and I find, well, Africa is called the cradle of humanity. Oh, interesting. So perhaps this second decade of, you know, people of African descent is just not something flowery, but it's really symbolic of, hey, the world, let's take a pause and find out where we came from and find out what are our origins, where we, what does research say, what, what has gone through the archaeologists, what have they said, what have been the studies, what have anthropologists say, what is it? And so the more, and I don't spend a lot of time reading into it because I've got other tons of things I need to be reading, but thus far that I've dug is to realize that, well, everything points back to the motherland. Everything points back to Africa. And so if it does, why this separation? Why this notion of, well, we are Irish, or we came from this place, or we are, and I'm not picking from here. I'm just saying that, like, why then is this, do you think that people have looked at it that deep, or no?
I don't. No, I don't. And especially not in a time in which we're seeing different factions rise up and people are becoming very nationalistic. Because the sentiment that you're expressing takes us back to looking at ourselves as a human race. But what we have in our world today is a lot of polarization. Doesn't matter what region you go to. And at the heart of that is going back to the concept of self-determination, right?
Sure.
This idea that either I believe the current state of affairs is allowing for that expression, or people trying to impose and to limit that expression of self-determination in certain places. And that essence, in essence, leads to the polarization that we're seeing and the swinging of a lot of places in the north to favor, right-wing or populist kind of perspectives. I think the element that you're speaking to, though, allows us to transcend the modern boundaries or the modern borders that have created this, to ask a conversation about where did we as a human race begin from? What is the essence of that? And what is it that allows us to explore? I don't think we're ready for that yet. I don't think we're ready for that.
Man, I mean, it's sad to think about it in that sense of, wow, we're not ready for it. Because I think about it in very simple terms. The sky is big enough for every single bird to fly. Right? And so if it is, then why the nationalistic sentiment? There could be perhaps interests around economy in terms of, but certainly we could have a conversation around, okay, how do we move forward as humanity? How do we agree that, look, there is an existential crisis when it comes to climate change? I was watching a documentary with my family about the Amazon and how, the cutting down of trees and ecosystem, they're drilling oil and all of these things, and how that's affecting not just the Amazon, but how all of that is affecting the whole world. And then recently I started watching Will Smith's National Geographic documentary, and he's out in, was it in the North Pole or South Pole? North Pole, I think. And he's talking to researchers there from Brazil who have done these models, and they're like, look, ice is telling us so much about not only the foundation of the earth, but the impact of climate change. And so if, as human beings, we agree on this fundamental principle of, hey, we are coming from one place, and two, this is what we have as a home, we got to protect it. Then this nationalistic debate or argument, perhaps in some ways, changes course perhaps to move towards, hey, here's a world where we want to build. As Canada, here are the things that this country holds as endowments, as minerals, and this is our contribution to the world to build this piece. And then Nigeria would say, hey, you know what, we've got lots of oil, we've got lots of this, we've got lots of people skills. Right? And then another country, Brazil, would say, hey, we've figured out how to protect the Amazon. We've figured out perhaps how to protect even jungles and stuff like that. Here's how we can do it. Right? And then another country comes in and says, hey, here's how we can... oh, man, maybe I'm just being idealistic.
No, infinite opportunities. Infinite opportunities. But there's two things that you said that we need to highlight. First and foremost, this idea of one nation having resources that would benefit the world. There's so many things that need to happen before we get there. Because we need to unpack the fact that many of the countries that hold these resources in the global south were put into systems and structures like structural adjustment ones, which limited their ability to actually expand and to fully achieve that national self-determination. And so before we can even get to a conversation of sharing, I'm not saying we shouldn't, a lot of these countries feel that it's their right to first get to a place where they feel that they're actually on par, if not better. Let's take it deeper because I think sometimes we oversimplify this. It's not just a conversation about looking at the world and thinking about how we're going to help humanity, because we've created this separation of North and South, East and West.
Yeah.
So those countries over there, or those indigenous people, because that's the new one that we're using to demarcate developed or developing, right? It's in a way it's the indigenous way, which isn't the Western way, which isn't the technical or advanced or scientific way. And so that nuance, as you see that continue to be the narrative that is shared, until we can embrace something that isn't canonical, because it hasn't been in the literature, because those voices weren't brought into the space, until we can embrace that as actual true knowledge, regardless of who it came from or what that source is, we can't even start to have these conversations of how we're going to share the wealth and the resources. I think there's so many tangible examples, even in a world which would espouse, or countries that would express themselves as being supportive of different parts of the world coming to the top, with a neo-colonial agenda and mindset. Even if I can even speak about the recent African Cup of Nations. For every African Cup of Nations up until this one, it was every 2 years. But now the Europeans decide that, we need to shift it to 4 years. That in itself is again saying you need to conform to it's another form of what we would say no longer exists. But these things continue to show up in all different sectors. It's not just in sports. It's not just in politics. It's not just in natural resources. The richest man in Nigeria has refineries there, but nobody's looking to partner with him, because what would that do? It would create liberation for
a different set of power, different economic set of power.
So as we have gotten to a place, and you think about the Treaty of Westphalia, and you think about the formation of the nation state, and then you think about all of these places across the continent in the 60s just getting this idea of independence. Many of these countries, not up to 100 years old in terms of their current state. So before we can start to talk about bringing in a collective pool, and we think about the global commons, which we should be mindful of, there has to be even a feeling for them that they are independent and able to stand on their own, and not relying on somebody else to support their own dreams and visions. We have a lot of work to do, my brother. A lot of work to do.
That's heavy, but I don't want to end this session on that heavy note. I've asked you my 3 questions before, and here's how I'm thinking about how to conclude our conversation today. And I know you and I want to come over to Vancouver at some point and just continue some of these conversations, and also bring in, maybe we could, I've got some colleagues at UBC, maybe we could, pick up conversations there, and, have roundtables and see, particularly during this Black History Month. So here's a question. With all of these things that you've mentioned, and we're not ready, we're not there, what art thou? What do we do now as next steps? So give us, what do we do?
What do we do? Well, we continue to champion Black voices. We create space for those stories to be told. We don't wait for the story to be told by somebody other than those individuals, but in fact, we are creating avenues and platforms for them to be shared. We continue to celebrate Black brilliance in the day-to-day pieces, highlighting the fact that there's people who are doing great work in ways that maybe isn't getting, as your podcast does, their voices to be heard. I'm thinking about 3 local women. Last time you asked me the question about who I'd sit with. So I'm going to give a shout out to 3 women in this Pacific Northwest region.
Let's go.
Who exhibit and personify that Black excellence. Dr. June Francis, the work that she's done is immense. It is, from a legal standpoint, from an educational standpoint, what she does in terms of championing and really espousing Black excellence. Dr. Yabom Gilchrist, she is a force unto herself as well. She is somebody who works in many spaces of strategy, working with governance, working in all of these ways to really espouse what it means to be Black in spaces that hasn't welcomed Black voices. And what I love is she always grounds her practice in pulling on her own roots, and that for me is the element of Black brilliance. And another one, because we're talking about the makeup of British Columbia and talking about the celebration of generations past and who's here now, there was research conducted by a lady named Alice Mirage several years ago. And in it, she tells the story of who are the Black people in British Columbia. What is the makeup? Where are they coming from? What is it that brought them here? And the African Ancestry Project is what she's put together. And I think, those are, to me, the expressions of Black brilliance in the day-to-day pieces that don't only just look at the sports, don't just look at the music, but actually show that people are showing up and doing very amazing things and having a huge impact. So as I think about the steps we're taking, it is marrying the soft culture or soft power with the music, with the arts, because those things are powerful too, with the cuisine, while also ensuring that as we look at our colleagues and the people that are working here, that we don't see Black first, but we actually see them as people who are contributing. And so we welcome their different value beliefs, worldviews into the space that allow them to actually contribute to something which is richer because they have an alternate perspective.
That's amazing. Olaolu, it's always such a pleasure to speak with you, to have conversations with you around this. Your intellect and what you bring is always amazing. And so as we think about the past, the luminaries, right, as we celebrate those, I also want to celebrate you and celebrate the work that you are doing in community, in BC, nationally, as well as, around the world. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for showcasing Black brilliance to the young learners, to the young children in community, in school. And as you continue to do that, I am so grateful, and community is grateful for the work that you do. Thanks for coming again for this conversation, and look forward to the next time that we meet in person and have a coffee.
Absolutely, bro. I tip my hat to you also, and I'm very grateful for the space to speak, but also for the work that you do, and keep shining that light and flying that flag of brilliance, because you fully embody it, my brother.
Thank you, my brother. For me, it's about Ubuntu. I am because we are, right? I'm Patrick because of you, Olaolu. I'm Patrick because of, everyone that's around me. And so that's what we carry forward. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, my brother. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Voices Listed podcast with Dr. P. Mac. I hope you enjoyed insights that came out of this conversation. Keep your notifications on. Our next episode will be dropping soon. Thank you and enjoy.